Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Friday, we are back for another live episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. I'm your host, Anandio Swagu. Always a pleasure to join you guys. I'm happy to be here. Today, we're going to get into the online payment or digital payment ecosystem. So, every time you go to an online store like Amazon or you go to your friendly merchant and use your credit card, we're going to go into the different plays in the game and how that works. It's a topic that I've been curious about. Over the years, obviously, I've touched it, learned some things around it, but there was an interesting white paper that came out. So gave a real good description of everything. So what I'm going to do today is break this down for you guys. Today is episode 1 of a 2-part series. This week, we're just going to get a general idea of the online payment ecosystem and all the players involved, from acquirers to the issuer banks. You're going to learn all those different terms. And next week, we're going to talk about security. Because obviously security is extremely important, and best practices and so forth. As always with the show, we're going to slightly touch base on some current news events. Due to the economic conditions, we've been talking more about layoffs. So we're going to go into some of the companies that have been laying people off in the technology sector, and then we're going to jump into our main topic of the day. Let's get some housekeeping stuff in order. So we are going live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. On those platforms, feel free to comment, and your comment will be part of the video if appropriate, obviously. And we are also going live from Instagram. Instagram, you're getting a behind-the-scenes footage because it doesn't connect to our streaming platform. So you're getting a behind-the-scenes footage of the show. If you want to get the full show with the presentations, go to the techbehindfintech.com, and you'll be able to see a link to our to the live episode, so you can get all the different slides we're going to post. On the podcast listeners, when you hear this, I'm going to do my best to describe some of the visual artifacts that we have. This way, you won't be left out of the loop. We do have we launched our official podcast, the Tech Behind FinTech. So the audio version of this episode will be released probably within the next week or so. So, without further ado, let's jump into the show for the week. Always happy to be here. Also, listen, comments are always wanted, right? So yeah, interaction is awesome. You list a comment, a question. If you have experience in the payment industry and you just want to lend some insight that myself and the audience can learn from, please feel free to jump in the comments on those platforms, on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch. I'll add your comment to the show. We'll talk about it. If you want to add further detail or things of that nature, feel free to plug yourself. It's all good. That's what we're here for. Learn and grow as a community within this FinTech community. So let's jump into that's what we're going to talk about today. So, okay. Let's jump into it. All right, so the first thing we see, layoffs in the sectors that are happening this for the last week. Okta, security firm, 300 people, 5% of their workforce. Not going to list everything. Autodesk, heard of that. San Francisco-based company, 250 employees, 2% of their workforce. Bittrex is a crypto exchange. 80 employees have been laid off. Going down the list, Splunk, logging capabilities and so forth. 325 people laid off, 4% of their workforce. This is a data company. Pinterest, social media and things alike, 150 employees. DraftKings, 140. 4% of their workforce. Chain Analysis, crypto company, 44 employees. All right, so we're gonna touch on those. All right, let's go to the next. Ironically, Fizz, right? We're gonna actually, they're part of the payment ecosystem, so we'll be talking about them, but they laid off 2% of their workforce, which is equivalent to 2,600 jobs. So let's get some details on Fizz. So U.S. banking and payments technology giant Fizz has reportedly so far laid off 2,600 employees. Reports that the firm was planning to add thousands of jobs came to light in November last year. I guess with their CEO looking to cut costs following the slump in the company's share price over 2022. We are focused on permanently reshaping our cost structure through both cost reduction and containment initiatives. Ferris told investors early in this month. Ferris was appointed as president in February last year and took over as CEO from Gary Norcross on January 1st, 2023. Fizz's shares have dropped around 35% in the past year, wiping out almost 30 billion in market cap. Wow. So they're a 28-year fintech veteran. Ferris joined Fizz as chief operating officer through its 2019 acquisition of payment software firm WorldPay, where she served as CFO. All right, let's move on from that. But actually, they're going to come up because they're a major player in the payment online payment ecosystem. PayPal also laid off 2,000 staff. They're going to lay off 2,000 staff over the next few weeks. Let's get some information on that. So the payment giant PayPal is set to lay off approximately 2,000 employees, or 7% of its total staff headcount over the next few weeks. In a message to employees, PayPal President and CEO Dan Schulman cites the challenging macroeconomic environment as a reason behind the job cuts as the company looks to adapt to shifting market conditions. While we have made substantial progress in right-sizing our cost structure and focused our resources on our core strategic priorities, we have more work to do. Let's see some other information. They're saying that departed employees will be supported with a generous severance package and consultation where needed. PayPal added a number of new names to its C-suite last year, with John Kim joining as chief product officer in September, Blake Jorgensen as chief financial officer in August, and Akana Dekis as chief information officer in March. Okay, that's it. Now let's jump into our main topic. Thank you for those joining on IG. Like I said, if you want to see the slides of the show and go through it, we're gonna be live on you can go to Tech Behind FinTech. It's a YouTube link there. All right, cool. All right, let's go into the main topic of the day. Pick up my screen. Online payment ecosystem. So what we're looking at, for those who are just looking at or hearing the audio of this particular episode, we're looking at the online payment ecosystem and how it works. So right now, we're seeing just a bunch of players in the game, right? So credit card networks. You guys have heard of, obviously, American Express, Discover, Visa, MasterCard. We're going to get into the definitions of some of these other terms: acquirers, Barclaycard, Chase Payment Tech, Citi, Fizz. We just heard that Fizz is laying off people earlier in this episode. Issuers, Chase Bank, American Express, Citibank, HSBC, TD Bank, gateways, Braintree, Digital River, Klarna, WePay, Stripe, Square, ISOs, PayScout, Nuvei, Flagship. So, what do all these different terms mean? And that's what we're going to kind of jump through. So we kind of on if you're viewing it, you just saw different terms or different companies you may have heard before. but each of them can be grouped into different categories. So right now, let's go into the categories so we understand what all these things mean. So the first is basically understanding the subgroups and the key players in it. So issuers, what are issuers? They're basically the banks and other financial institutions that issue credit cards to consumers on behalf of the card's network. So, if you look at your credit cards, if you go to your wallet and look at your credit cards, like Chase, Bank of America, those banks basically issue the credit cards to consumers, people like us. Now, on the other side of that is an acquirer. Acquirer is a bank or financial institution that enables a merchant to accept credit card payments from a customer card issuing bank with a credit card network. So on one side, you have the issuer, they're giving the credit cards. On another side, you have the acquirer, where they are they're enabling the merchant to accept your credit card payments. So it's a bunch of terms. Credit card network. So a credit card network such as Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover facilitate transaction among consumers, merchants, processors, and banks. So that would be the credit card. Like some of these that you have, they're also the credit card network, and they facilitate the transactions among all the different parties involved. Payment processors, next term. So payment or credit card processors are companies that work with in the background to provide payment processing services to merchants. Their responsibilities include establishing merchants account, accepting and processing credit, debit, and prepayment credit cards, managing credit and debit card processing, and implementing certain anti-fraud measures. So we're going to go over these terms, and then we're going to see a chart of the workflow, and then I'm going to describe that workflow for those that are just listening to this and not able to see the actual presentation. Payment gateway. So a payment gateway is a software application that enables the merchants to accept payments and transmits payments data for processing. Payment gateway securely encrypts payment information and transfers that data between merchant, store, and website. One of the most important aspects of the gateway is a robust security standards. Excuse me. Next, we have merchant service providers, MSPs, enable merchants to process payments by setting up and overseeing merchant processing accounts and managing front-end customer transactions. That's such as all the hardware and software needed to facilitate the payments. Let's go over some more terms. ISO, an independent sales organization. So they are a type of merchant service provider. They sell credit card processing services to merchants, and they act as intermediaries between merchants, payment processors, and acquiring banks. So this is a new term, payment facilitators, PayFacs. They're merchant services providers that enable merchants to accept payments. However, PayFacs offer several unique benefits that are not as prevalent with ISOs. For example, PayFacs, which is payment facilitators, a PayFacs merchant customer benefit from fast and seamless account onboarding, simple flat rate, and advanced technology. So they seem to as another alternative to dealing with an independent sales organization for a merchant who wants to enable credit card services in their business. All right, with all that said and done, since we just talked about these definitions, let's look at the workflow, right? So I got this from a really cool white paper, and I think it was really descriptive, and it was really awesome job that they did. So if we look at the workflow, right, we have the issuing bank, which you talked about. They issue a card to a customer, so that's you getting your credit card. That customer goes on an online store or into a merchant, into a store, or online store or a physical store, right? And they find things that they want, and then they buy it. So they submit their order. That online store now goes back and forth, which is the merchant. They go back and forth with the payment gateway. The payment gateway, they confirm that with the acquiring bank. right? So then from the acquiring bank, it goes back to a connection to the credit card network itself. So we talk about the credit card networks like MasterCard, Visa, American Express. The payment is approved, and then the merchant gets funded. So there are some response, and we're going to go through the how to acquire next. This is just a high level workflow, and now we're going to go through step by step on how that works, because there is some correspondence, because they actually have to verify that credit card is a legit credit card, it's not over its limit, and so forth. So listen, if anytime you want to chime in, if you're an expert in this field or you have questions, comments, chime in. Let's get the party started. Let's get some interactions. Not a problem. All right. So we just went through the high level workflow. Now we're going to go through the authorization process. So as you said before, so the customer purchases some goods and services from a merchant, they swipe their credit card. That's the first step, right? The customer's card information is transmitted to the merchant's payments processor, who in turn passes the credit card information and transaction amount to the merchant's bank's acquiring bank. You just saw how that works. The acquiring bank captures the transactions and forwards the information to the customer's credit card network, Visa, Master, American Express, right? The credit card network then routes the transactions to the cardholder bank, the issuer's bank. So the issuer's bank is on the customer side, and the acquiring bank's on the merchant side. And then it requests approval, right? The transaction is approved or declined depending on availability of funds and the status of the cardholder's account. This approval process is known as authorization. And you obviously see, right? This stuff happens like fast, like seamless almost to you, which you are most people here are the consumer, but a lot of things are going back and forth in terms of the communication over the network. Step 5, the issuing bank sends a response back to the credit card network. If the authorization was approved, the issuing bank assigns and transmits an authorization code along with its response, and a hold is placed on the cardholder's funds. You ever purchased something, then went to your credit card online and you saw that it was pending? Well, that's this step. The credit card network sends approval to the merchant's payments processor, who in turn sends approval to the acquiring bank. Last step of your authorization process, the acquiring bank routes the approval code in response to the merchant's terminal. Depending on the merchant transaction type, the merchant's terminal may print a receipt for the customer to sign. So that's authorization. Now, the next part is actually settlement at the end of the day. You have to, like we always say, you have to settle balances, settle your accounts. So at the end of each day, the merchant closes out the day's sales and transmits the information to their payment processor, who in turn transmits the information to the acquiring bank. This step, in which the merchant initiates transfer of the funds to their account, is known as capture. The acquiring bank routes all transaction information to the credit card network for settlement, who in turn passes all approved transactions to the cardholder's issuing bank. The issuing bank transfers the funds to the merchant's acquiring bank minus the interchange fee. The acquiring bank then deposits the amount less the merchant's discount fee to the merchant's bank account. So obviously, merchants it's not like you spend a merchant charges you $100 for something and they get the full 100. There's fees in all these different transactions going back and forth. The issuing bank bills the cardholder for the transaction. So that's how it works. This is honestly, it's one of those things where, like, over the years I had to touch base on it because certain companies I've been involved with dealt with payments and so forth, but haven't in a while. So just going through the process again, I found interesting. Hope you do too. All right. So what's next? So now let's go over some of the largest payment providers, right? So that we know, we probably heard these names before, but let's go over what some of them do. So we have Fidelity, Card Knox. Card Knox is actually where a lot of this information came from today. Citibank, Stripe, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Fiserv, Chase for Business, Square, uh, World Pay. Remember, it's Fizz acquired World Pay. I think their former CFO is now CEO of Fizz. Um, Adyen, Heartland, Global Payments, and Fizz. Those are some of the largest payment providers in the game. Take a second here. Let me look and see if there are any questions. I don't see any questions. But let's move on. Okay. Um, yeah, that's really all the different steps, right? Now we can kind of go into where things are heading, right? There's an interesting stat from a research article. Hold up, let's see. Jeffrey, what's up, Jeff? Sorry, a little bit late. Busy day. How's it work now with companies such as a firm or shop with how payments are broken up? That is an excellent question. Um, I don't really have the answer for right now, right? Because a firm or shop, from my understanding, those are the buy now, pay later firms, right? So if that's the case, with the buy now, pay later movement, this is me making an assumption, but just thinking about the whole process, they're going to front the bill, right? So you go to a company like a firm or merchant, they have some interaction, you leverage that, right? Then they front your bill, and now you get into a situation where you're paying them um, over a period of time. So it's similar to some sort of credit card situation. The intricacies between how the buy now, pay later firms interact with the merchant and the different agreements they have with that, I'm not privy to at this point. But that is a great question. But I'm just making the assumption that they have to pay them. They have to. It's one of those things, right? So I'm a firm. I'm a buy now, pay later, right? Um, Situation, right? I have relationships with certain merchants. You go now to try to buy something. You want to leverage my service, and let's say the item costs $500. Well, let's just say the item costs $1,000, right? Now, based on your credit, because you have to get approved, I would assume. I haven't personally used the buy now, pay later situation, but I'm basing it off of some assumption. They do the necessary vetting of you. You get approved, right? So now you want to buy something for 1,000 online, they front that bill. And so now you have to now pay them over time. I'm assuming for them to make some sort of money, that thousand is going to be with interest. So they're going to charge you over a period of time, similar to a credit card situation, that and you'll pay them back. And I think that's how they are in business. I know that they were struggling. That market was struggling, the buy now, pay later market, and I know there was some fraudulent activity there with people setting up accounts and basically just fake accounts and buy items and not with the intent of not paying them back. So I know there was some leakage in that department, but that's how I'm assuming it works. Because it just makes sense to me. They're really taking the shape of a credit card in a sense, right? But I would need to do some more research on that. Matter of fact, let me take a note of that. This is part one of the part two episode. So next week we'll talk about security, and I'll confirm that. But that's how I'm assuming it works. Um, so that good question, great question. Buy now, pay later question. Great question, Jeff. You always bring good questions, man. Appreciate you. Um, cool. Let's see if there's some more interaction. I mean, what do you think about the response? I mean, is that makes sense to me, right? Based on our yeah, hold on, I'm trying to going back too far. Based on our flow chart, right? The with the because if we now look, but basically what we're looking back, I'm back to this payment cycle based on Jeff's question. If we look at it, right, they would have to fit in right now. If you're using a firm, it means you don't need the your personal credit card, so they have their buy now pay later solution. So they would have to front that charge to the merchant, and they would have to still be verified. The question that I have that I need to dig more into is that interaction because in dealing with the affirm situation, how does it work behind the scenes? And that might be a whole other show, like really diving into the network of a buy now pay later solution. So great question. Any more questions? Let's keep this party going. Let me look at some things real quick. What does it bring up? A second. It was some future stuff about some the changing of the landscape. We're talking about because now we have stuff like contactless payment adoption. Um, the same concept. It's just you're not sliding the card in anymore. You're doing the concept. I've been using it. It's pretty cool. I want to see something. That is an excellent question because you have me thinking now. Because now I'm curious. Let's see if I have something like that in my notes so I can get the exact details of it. No, but no. What next week we're gonna dive into security of this whole thing and look at some security best practices. I would like to see previous breaches or fraudulent activity and so forth. So we're going to dive into that next week. So today was just really just going over, getting a high level summary of the actual transactions. But now with that question, I mean, and understand, right? With this show, a lot of the topics that we come up with is really just based on my own curiosity. It's like I'm like, oh wow, like how does that work? Even though like my field is cybersecurity and fintech. That's like what I do. But it's fintech and it's looking at the financial services. It's the gift that keeps giving. It's so vast. So it's an endless supply of topics. And then when you start thinking about some of the new technical advances and how it applies to finance. That's a whole other conversation. Like last week, we dived into quantum computing, and that was like a mind blower for me. It was like, wow, and just seeing where the industry's at, seeing how it can assist with financial services and so forth in fintech. So, this week was really curious about the whole payment side. Didn't want to cover doing the overview and payments and security in one shot because I think it would have went too much. So I think this is a good, and that's what we're going to do in the future because sometimes we get in the habit of trying to cover a lot at once. So we're going to start breaking these into episodes. So I hope you got something out of this, right? In terms of now, every time you go to your local stores or shop online, you kind of have a general understanding now of some of the things that are happening behind the scenes after watching this, and it's a really interesting situation. Jeff, really good question. Going to have me now thinking about that because now I'm really curious. If what I said in terms of looking at that assumption on how it works is accurate. So I'm going to have to do some little digging on that. But definitely logically, that's what I think. Today's show is sponsored by Strategic Generation, offering cybersecurity, SOC 2, and application penetration testing services. Just have to put that plug in. I'm going to give it a second because we are at our show time to see if there are additional questions. Okay, I don't really, doesn't look like there's questions. I know there's always like a slight delay. So I'm going to start doing some housekeeping stuff. Let me big up people who signed in on IG. I did my little waves and hellos. Thanks for signing in. Appreciate you guys. Okay. Well, it doesn't look like we are having any questions right now. So we're going to sign off for the day. Thank you very much for your time today. Remember, next week is part 2 of this series on the online payment ecosystem. And we're going to talk about security. And we're going to, I'm going to follow up on that question, Jeff. Like I said, I just want to make sure my answer was accurate. All right, guys, you have a great day, great weekend. And take care of yourself. Signing out, Tech Behind FinTech. Cheers.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.